I'm going to begin today by acknowledging this beautiful country that I'm on, Gadigal Wongal country. I was born here. I've lived here most of my life, and most of the joys that have happened in my life and my parents' life and my son's life have happened right here in Gadigal Wongal country. It sustains everybody, no matter where they're from. And the spirit of the sandstone, the beaches, the swampy area that we live in, this region here, even when we don't see it, fills our dhui, our spirit, and makes us strong. So I walk with a very gentle step and an open hand and a loving heart on Gadigal and Wongal country today. When I began writing Song of the Crocodile, I thought, how am I going to do this, Because I write 3-minute songs. How am I going to do this? I knew there were things that I wanted to explore, not answer and not say, but I wanted to explore by writing. And they were really in response to how I understood a connection to my own homeland, my father and his generation's connection to our homeland, and also how do I work that into an understanding of who I am today living on somebody else's homeland. So the 3 questions that I really wanted to pose on paper were, what is the spirit of place? How does that spirit affect the people that walk above it? And also, what effect do we have on the essence of that place? They were the things that I wanted to explore. And the way that I got into it was thinking about music and writing about music rather than singing. So characters and places came out that I understood when I started to write. It was almost like a composition. Instead of using notes, I was using letters and combinations of letters and words, and that's really what got me rolling and got me writing, for a good 2 or 3 years. Yuwaalaraay, my homeland, is North West New South Wales, around the towns today of Walgett, Lightning Ridge. My grandparents were born in a tiny little place called Angledale. I think there's like 30 people living there now. But back in the early 1900s, it was this bustling metropolis in the middle of the Northwest Plains, fueled by cattle stations and the movement of workers and animals along the rivers of the Northwest, and that's Yuwaalaraay country or Yuwaalaraay country. We're flat plains people, we're river people, we're freshwater people, and our word for when the floods break the banks, the water breaks the banks, is the same word that we have for Milky Way. So in that way, we're always connected to the land and sky. We are the people in the in-between Yuwaalaraay country and the great Warrnambool Milky Way. So when we talk about, when I think about elders in my homeland and specifically my family, generations of my family, I like to think that the book is a little bit of a time travel for me to go back to places that are very familiar to me, even though, I wasn't even a twinkle in the eye back then. But to see the places that they spoke of with such love and joy. They talk about those times as being their golden years. And so I wanted to write this place so I could jump into it and look around and understand that place the way that they did. Yuwaalaraay language is all through the book, and its significance really, I think I would like to place myself as a student of language within the book. I didn't write down what I knew so much as wanted to create a connection to learning, yes, words, but context and ways to be. And language for me is the perfect way to do that. So is a lot of Yuwaalaraay language in the book, which is used in our communities. So things like Mie and Bire, boy and girl, and Gumbai, my sweetheart, and Bitterly for child. These are all words that we use, are really important in our teaching. The first thing that we learn when we learn language are the words for the people we're connected to. So there's those kind of uses of language in the book. Then there is sort of me experimenting with the beauty of Yuwaalaraay language. So there are a couple of names of characters in the book, which is me talking about how I relate to language concepts, but also words. So there's a beautiful teacher in the book. Her name is Malawil Dul Murunga. A big long name for a little girl. And I thought I'm gonna make it really long because I want people to interact with that, the concepts in that. And I also want people to say her name and not think, oh, that girl with the that name. I wanted to encourage people to swim in Yuwaalaraay language. Malawil Dul Murunga. It's like a song itself. Malawil is our word for shadow, and shadow is important in our community for our old people, especially because you always navigated yourself around somebody's shadow. The shadow was an extension of your own self. Malawil Dul is our little word for little or small. Muran is a word that we have for the darkest point before dawn. And I put that word in that girl's name because, 5 letters or something, Muran. Yet it is this whole scope of knowledge, the darkest point just before dawn. And Ga at the end of her name means on or at. So she's the littlest shadow at the darkest point before dawn. That was a way of me playing with these language and concepts, but also if she's a shadow at the darkest point where there is no shadow, she doesn't exist. And that sort of reflects in a bit of her story in the book. So there was me playing and relating and connecting to language. And then there was also me taking language words and anglicising them and creating a new kind of language in itself. So Darnmore, the name of the town, comes from an anglicisation of the word Dunmur in Yuwaalaraay, which means a gravesite or burial ground. So all those different ways were ways for me to deepen a connection to understandings of language and not have them just exist as learnt Yuwaalaraay language or translated Yuwaalaraay into English. I wanted to have a connection to all the different ways language can breathe, and I tried to work that into the story. When I started writing, I thought, here I'm going to have another career now, put it on top of all the little bits and pieces I do. I thought, author. But I didn't realise then, because I'm Wamba, that you don't put one down and start another and there is no connection. There was a very strong connection between writing a 3 or 4 minute folk song and writing a story that goes on for the lives of 3 generations. I just didn't understand it until I got to the end and I thought, oh yeah, you can actually, a song is also a book. Place is sort of, I'm a bit obsessed with it. Often because I'm asked to think and talk about it in my, everyday life here in Sydney. And partly also because I am disconnected but from my homeland, but also very strongly connected to somebody else's. And so I often think and sing and write about the place where I am not. And I wonder now whether the world of the book, Darnmore as a town and its outskirts, which is where Aboriginal families were kept, sort of mirrors my it's not dislocation, because I don't feel that I am denied anything. I'm sort of lucky to come from generations who've had to struggle to make sure that we're never disconnected. But I think the world of the book has these kind of competing understandings of place, absolutely almost opposite understandings of landscape, and a wedge between what you are and aren't able to access. And this is something that I think was a lived experience for my father and definitely his generation, but also my grandparents. They were moved where they were told they needed to be moved to, and they were plonked on the outskirts, and then they were forced into another town, and there was very little choice in their lives about where they lived and how. And that was something that I wanted to feel. I wanted to share the burden of that. I didn't want those fellas to hold on to the sadness of that. I think the book there's a very stark divide. When I wrote it also, there was a very strong feeling of a boundary that couldn't be crossed by Aboriginal people. But it wasn't just physical. There was a lot of different types of spaces where people were expected not to go. So I know, living in Sydney, and actually a lot of my working life is about talking about spaces where everybody is welcome and equal and can share different understandings of place. I get paid to do that here. Yet in a generation, it's so different. And I think, we need to know that, so then we can come and create spaces where everybody is welcome and equal and valid. And we don't talk about power in blackfella ways, but we talk about space. Everyone is supported to stand in the space that they need. And I think, I'm an inner Westie, so I'm biased, but the inner West knows how to do that. The character Millie in the book is a real sort of, there's lots of words we can describe her as. She's almost a bellwether about a lot of shifting movement, a lot of change that's going on for black families and white families. And she's also a kind of beacon for this idea of progress. And the life that she navigated in the book was at a crucial point in Darnmore history. She was at the forefront of this wave of people who were starting to have access to the town, whether it's a school or maybe a business or a house in town. Her mother was the laundress of the mayor and his wife. She was sort of almost the conduit between these two previously separated, pushed apart worlds. And I think as a character, she's sort of carried the burden of that difficulty, because she could see on the horizon all this opportunity that her parents had always lamented. But there was nobody in front of her to show her how to do it. And when I think about Millie, I think about, it's almost like this sort of huge bomb of smoke and ash and things that she needs to rise from to walk her own story. Yet sometimes that smoke covers her eyes and she can't see where she's going. Also around her, people are still trying to say, you come back here and don't you go over there, and people are still kind of trying to push and manipulate her to where they think is safe. And so when I think about Millie, I think she's a strong little girl, that one. But almost the circumstances that she had to navigate were almost too much for her to bear. I got this really odd question, something that I found really odd very early on when I did a reading, that I read something about, you know, all the fellas up in the sky. And they asked me a question about magical realism. And I thought, what the hell is that? I had never heard those two words. And then I, you know, trying to think on my feet. Oh, they mean the mob. And this idea of what I understand ancestors to be, which are sort of dudes probably standing there and there, over there maybe, listening and watching and waiting, you know, make sure you say this, and, you know, very active in your living life, being these kind of magical things that appear and create some sort of, you know, magic and disappear, was very foreign to me. For me, all those fellas up in the star in the book, there's a series of people that live and pass away and move into Warrnambool, our Milky Way, and sit down there and have opinions and point out things and try and make things happen in the world below. This is how I understand what happens to our people when they leave us and go elsewhere. If that's what it is, then, you know, I'm happy. And I remember sometimes I would write and I'd try and think of a word and it would come into my mind and I knew I didn't think of it. I didn't search for it. It would come and I'd just say thank you and keep going like that. So there was a real sense for me, because I'm talking about place and talking about connection and talking about made up things and real things that are in our worldview, that there are people invested in the telling of that. So ancestors, for me, are wonderful editors. They're rousing on me now. But also very important in the creation of anything. Progress looks different for different people. Definitely in the book, I hope that there's a sense that there's a tension in what the understanding of progress is. I mean, the town thinks progress is building this huge mound to keep out the water in case of a flood, where I think the campgrounds people, mob, would think we need a flood for this land to bloom and blossom the way that it's meant to. And so there are all these these tensions between how you understand place. And I think building on top of and higher and stronger and more robust may look like progress to some people. But also, and I think for a lot of Indigenous communities, we would say significant progress is made when people listen. We've got a lot of yarns going on about, you know, us as sovereign people. And there are a lot of negotiations about what does that need to look like for us as Aboriginal people. Does it need to look like all the big buildings down here? It needs to look like everybody moving together. So I think that there's a bit of that going on. Well, there's a lot of it going on in the book. There's this mob that want to drive a sense of progression, which means they're, you know, the second in the Southern Hemisphere to have a levy. And then there's other people who just want electricity and running water. And also want an understanding of a deep and a quiet relationship to place. At the end of the book, I've got a little thing of thanks to all the aunties of the Crocodile, and it's sort of a collection of women over the last 10 years at least, who have been directly involved in me picking up a pen and trying to write a story. Almost, not almost all, A large majority of those women have been Aboriginal women. Larissa Barrent was a very early mentor of mine. We met each month for a year, and she bought me dinner. And for those 12 times, she just said, keep going. How are you going? What are you up to? Keep going, you can do it. And all these beautiful stories like Tara June Winch, The Yield, Too Much Lip, all these stories coming out, see? And like those ancestors waiting in the star, those fellas are that for me, but you know, you can actually email them and reach out to them. How beautiful is that? They're not magical realism. Those fellas, they're as real as this table here, look. And so it's a beautiful thing to think that this belongs to them as much as it does to my community and my family, my elders, that the landscape for this comes from that. This song is called Dariwo, and Dariwo is our word for Narran Lakes. And actually, the end point for the book is the beginning of a dreaming story of how Narran Lakes were made. My Ngurumba, my homeland. So this song is connected to everything inside those pages, and everyone around that goes into making me who I am. Nariwa calls me, Nariwa calls me to come, and the hard grain beneath my feet dissolves into red country, and I'm right where I belong, my head filled with the song of Dariwo. Water birds circling high, painted tracks through the sky, and the water beneath them hides Mangi for all the tribes we share, and care for others there. My mind taking me there to Dariwo. Ngiarman balangur ngau ngaingli, ilangu ngari 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 ngapularnga, girngenga girngenga kaki kaki, ngiar mangangea berganda dandui mali, Buddha leaves cleansing country, bright and pure swirls around. Breathe it in, take in country, as she holds you in her loving arms. Oh, I drift, I dream, my love, Dariwo, Dariwo, Dariwo. My head filled with the song of Dariwo.